Now, on 105.9 FM and streaming worldwide on the WMAL app, O'Connor and Company.
It is 7:06 here on a busy Wednesday morning in your nation's capital, second day of July. Happy Independence Day week, by the way, as preparations continue down on the mall for what should be a pretty big party. Not as big as next year's party, but a big party nonetheless. Excited about that. Coming up at 8:05, we'll check in with Julio Rosas, who was on the ground in so-called Alligator, Alcatraz yesterday. Find out what he learned. And at 8:35, Susan Ferruccio, Washington Times. We'll get the latest from her about what she thinks will happen with the reconciliation package, the big, beautiful bill. That's coming up. I'm Larry O'Connor alongside Julie Gunlock, and joining us right now is one of our favorites. He, of course, is the chief political correspondent for the great Washington Examiner, host of the Byron York Show. Unironically, he is Byron York. Good morning, Byron.
Good morning, folks.
Listen, I want to hear your impression of what happened in the Senate and the parliamentarian and whether the House will take up the bill as it is or whether we have conference, all that stuff. But frankly, I was really taken in by your reporting over the course of the last week with regard to this intelligence assessment that got leaked to a friendly reporter at CNN who seems to really stumble upon a lot of anonymous leaks from the intelligence community over the past several years, and how wrong that intelligence assessment appears to be. Byron, as you told me once, I think, off the record at a conference we were at, these leaks are so ubiquitous, and one of the untold stories, Byron, is who leaked it and why they leaked it. And I don't know if we'll ever get the full story there. But what do you think of this? Once again, the intelligence community and a leak to damage Trump that was, well, by every measure, false.
It's happened again, hasn't it? You know, one of the things that is often done after a big event in Washington is there's kind of a race to establish the narrative, to tell the story of what happened. And what we saw after the bombing of Iran was just that happening. Now, you have to remember this wasn't just a U.S. bombing of Iran. It was more than a week of highly, highly targeted Israeli attacks on the Iranian nuclear system as well. So you had a whole lot of firepower directed at the Iranian nuclear program. We know that the Israeli intelligence just seems to be incredible about Iran. They seem to have penetrated every part of the Iranian nuclear program, know where to hit and who to hit. So you have all of that going on. And then immediately after President Trump authorizes U.S. bombing, you have a report that, well, you know, it really didn't do that much.
Right.
You know, they dropped 14 of these bunker buster bombs, each of which weighs 30,000 pounds, and they stuck them in a target the size of a refrigerator door, I believe, one after the other, and it just didn't do much damage. And you thought, wow. You know, even if Donald Trump just made the dumbest decision ever, how could the Israelis have messed up so much, you know?
But,
and so, yeah. Mm-hmm.
No. Go on.
Well, and so what happens is the earliest reports become the truth. They become the story. So this is, and so you had these, and afterwards, and we've seen this a million times, is the truth struggles to get its boots on and tell the actual story. And we had other people come out and say, wait a minute. We have a lot of evidence that this did devastating damage to the Iranian nuclear program. Now, is this a forever solution? They'll never, ever, ever in the history of the planet get it again? Well, no, but it's done devastating damage that will take years to recover from, because if you remember the initial reports, it was no big deal reports, said that it had set the Iranian nuclear program back only a handful of months, maybe as little as 2 months, maybe as much as 6 months. And you thought, I just don't believe that. That's crazy. And yet that's the line that was pushed, and that's the line that became the established truth because it was first. That's why you have this race to get the news out before anybody else.
Byron, the other thing that was happening at the same time of this narrative that it did nothing was almost gleefulness that it did nothing. And I'd like you to talk a little bit about that, because what's emerged now is this sort of, I guess you could say never Trump, or this anti-Trump stance is also anti-American in a lot of ways. It's like they were happy that this, of course it turns out not to be true, but they were happy that the reports were that it didn't do anything.
Yeah, well, I think it was all motivated by anti-Trump.
Yeah.
But it did, since this was a U.S. military operation, kind of sound like they were happy that the U.S. military had failed, which, by the way, it did not, but they were. Have to remember that the guiding force behind the first report of this leak from the Defense Intelligence Agency was a reporter named Natasha Bertrand, who works for CNN. And you may remember her from back in the Trump first term days. She was a huge proponent of the so-called Steele dossier, which was the collection of unsubstantiated and sensational rumors about Donald Trump presented as intelligence. And by the way, it had the famous, for you listeners out there, it had the famous P-tape allegation. She was also big on something called Alpha Bank, which was this crazy story that never was confirmed about the Trump campaign somehow pinging electronically with a Russian bank. And then in 2020, she's this behind the first reporting of the 50 former intelligence people who said that the Hunter Biden laptop had all the earmarks of a Russian intelligence operation. So, she's got quite a record, and she adds this to that distinguished record.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for your reporting on this. And, unlike other journalists, listen, you have your sources in this town, but you don't just rely on anonymous sources to hand you something and then you run with it. That's how journalism used to be, and we're now coming out of an era where we've got, celebrated journalists in Washington, D.C. who said that they could never really report on the incapacity or debilitation of Joe Biden's mental acuity because no one in the White House was talking to them. They didn't get any leaks about that. Well, you don't need leaks to tell a story, do you, Byron?
Well, both you raise such an interesting point, because both of those things, these reports on the intelligence of the Iranian bombing, and the Biden mental state, do rely on a certain amount of common sense.
Thank you.
Well, given that what I had just said about the Iranian bombing, you get this report that said, it's no big deal, just set them back a couple of months. You think to yourself, can that be right? I think I need to check with somebody else about this.
Thank you.
Because it just, and you think, well, maybe the person who's giving me this has some sort of motivation. And I should say, I don't want to suggest that this whole thing is the work of a single reporter at CNN. I think what's clearly going on is there are elements inside the intelligence community that are again trying to undermine President Trump. I know the White House is looking for them because you had this very hasty and very incomplete report from the Defense Intelligence Agency that in the hands of these kind of motivated reporters becomes this narrative that the whole bombing failed. And I think that the story behind the story, the bigger one, is that yet again there's a war inside the Trump administration with some elements of the intelligence community trying to undermine the president.
Well, Byron York, you and I share something in common, which is we are just as fascinated sometimes as the story behind the story as we are the story itself. That's why we love the conversation. Can you just pause for a minute here while we check traffic? Because I do want to get your latest on the Elon Musk, Donald Trump dust-up that escalated yesterday.
Okay.
WMAL, making sense of the news. Live from the Home Paramount Pest Control Studios. Home Paramount, the leader in pest control since 1939.
And as promised, we're right back here with Byron York as things between Elon Musk and Donald Trump. It looked like they had repaired their relationship, and then we're right back at it. Elon Musk upset that this reconciliation package is moving forward. He's concerned that it will explode the debt. He's right that the debt is going to get worse under this. But at the same time, if you don't pass this bill, then everyone's taxes increase at the end of the year. That's not a good solution either. Byron, I think it was overstated that Elon Musk was so instrumental in Donald Trump winning the election. He didn't hurt, certainly, but he wasn't the man who made Trump president. That said, it is kind of ironic that he's now become kind of a major rhetorical foe of President Trump's efforts to get this reconciliation package done.
Well, I think it was a mistake on President Trump's part to become so publicly close to Elon Musk and give him such a prominent position in the early days of the administration. And, you think to yourself, has it really been less than a month since Musk's big blow up? And, he just started talking about how the bill was an abomination and that Trump was in the Epstein files and that he was going to try to impeach the president. You think, wow. And that's actually, it has been less than a month. And now he's at it again. He seems to have relapsed here. And so the occasion is that the bill obviously just passed the Senate. So in the final hours of Senate consideration, Musk starts tweeting again. And his big deal, if you read what he writes, his big deal is the debt ceiling, that the bill would increase the debt ceiling by a larger amount than has ever been done before, which kind of makes sense because federal spending gets higher and higher and higher. Yeah. But anyway, this is a feature of the federal government, the debt ceiling, that some people find kind of ridiculous. But it's the law, and so they have to do it. And so Musk's idea, I guess, is that if you just don't increase the debt ceiling, the whole federal government kind of grinds to a halt, and then they'll cut spending. Then they'll have to cut spending. And I think one of the things that people who are brilliant in one area are not always brilliant in other areas. And am I being nice here? Is that good? And Musk obviously has accomplished enormous things in the field of space. I mean, the United States owes him a debt of gratitude for all the stuff he's done in space. Obviously, he's made tons of money from making electric cars as well. But this is an area in which he just does not have a lot of expertise. But he does have a big megaphone, and now he's talking about forming a third party, and he threatened, the bill still has to be passed by the House now, and he's threatened any Republican member of the House who votes for it. He's threatened them with a primary, and of course he's got $400 billion. He's got the money to make that happen, so he's trying to scare Republicans into killing this bill, which just happens to be the top legislative priority of President Trump.
Yeah, it's every tax cut that he ran on and promised, but plus reinforcements for the astounding job that the Border Patrol has done and Homeland Security has done, which, again, talk about an underreported story, Byron, and, we don't have to have that long a memory to know that it struck me that every single Democrat, from Chris Murray to Chuck Schumer to Elizabeth Warren, who are now screaming about how the sky is going to fall with Medicaid and other various benefits that they love so much due to the reconciliation package. People are going to be dying in the streets because of it. Right. These are the same people who said, Byron, that we could never secure the border unless we passed the big amnesty package they wanted a couple of years ago.
Yes, remember what Trump said about in his first speech to the joint session of Congress. He said, they told us that you'd have to pass legislation to secure the border when all you really needed was a new president.
Yeah.
But this bill is really incredibly important because it is the embodiment of everything, legislatively speaking, everything Trump has done for the last 8 years. It would make permanent the premier legislative accomplishment of the first term, which is the tax cuts. And it would fulfill the biggest unfulfilled promise from the first term, which is the border wall plus additional border security. It would keep the promises from the 2024 campaign, like no taxes on tips. It's everything that Trump has done kind of rolled into one, and now Musk is trying to kill it.
Yeah. Hey, in our final minute here, Byron, the other part of this story, again, the story behind the story, is the use of the Congressional Budget Office in determining what will happen if this bill is passed. First of all, they're always wrong. They never really score these things properly. But I've heard arguments made that the CBO today is very different than the CBO 20 years ago, or maybe even during the 90s under the Gingrich-Clinton era, in terms of the makeup of the CBO and the more aggressive political motivations from those people who work in that office. These are incredibly powerful people that you never know their names of. No one elected them. What do you know about the CBO, and has it become much more of sort of a political operation than it was maybe 30 years ago?
Well, I think that if you look at them below the director level, they are more political than they were years ago, because everything is more political than it was years ago. I mean,
that's fair.
It would be amazing if they just remained completely nonpartisan and down the line. The other thing is just the sheer impossibility of their job. I mean, if you look at their job, look at their reports, and they'll tell you that this bill will add X amount of dollars, this many billion of dollars to the deficit in 2034. I mean, really, can anybody predict what's going to happen in 2034? I mean, it's an insane job, and you get these 10-year predictions, and everybody knows they're BS, but they all rely on them. So I don't know. It's the way Congress works.
Yeah,
but it's hard to actually take it seriously.
It makes no sense. It's impossible, and it's the way Congress works. And I think that says it all. That's a title for your next book. Byron York, I could literally talk to you uninterrupted for hours, but sadly, we have reached our limit. Happy Independence Day. Have a great week this week.
Hey, happy 4th to you guys, too.
It's 7:23.
Coming up, we've got an update on FBI headquarters and that it might move to a new location, but not so far away. Naturally, some Democrats are not happy, so we'll give you an update on that. Keep it here. It's 7:30.
WMAL-FM, Woodbridge, Washington, a Cumulus media station. Making sense of the news. News Talk 105.9. WMAL. News now. Now, on 105.9 FM and streaming worldwide on the WMAL app. O'Connor and Company. WMAL.
It's 7:37. News Talk 105.9 WMAL, making sense of the news. Good Wednesday morning to one and all. Keep it here at 8:05. We're going to talk to Julio Rosas. He's going to tell us about Alligator, Alcatraz. He apparently went there and managed to escape alive. And at 8:35, Susan Ferruccio, Washington Times, she'll tell us the latest on the big, beautiful bill. You're listening to O'Connor and Company. I'm Julie Gunlock, and Larry's here somewhere. Larry,
I'm here.
Hello.
Sure, I'm here. Sorry, I was
Good
talking
morning.
to our friends over on Fox 5 there for a few minutes, and it went a little long.
That's okay. Good to have you here.
We have a couple of huge announcements out of Kash Patel's FBI that we want to share with you. The first is, well, let's remind you of where we were back in March when President Trump was, let's just say, reticent at the idea of giving the FBI a brand new headquarters, as was originally agreed to during the Biden administration. Take a listen.
They were going to build an FBI headquarters 3 hours away in Maryland, a liberal state, but that has no bearing on what I'm about to say, but we're going to stop it. Not going to let that happen.
Yeah, no, they're not going to let that happen, and that's official now. The president and the FBI director, Kash Patel, has announced that they are, in fact, going to shut down the J. Edgar Hoover building. Remember when Kash Patel, Julie, said that he was going to shut it down completely and turn it into a museum of the deep state?
I love Kash. He's great. Talk about triggering.
That would actually be pretty fantastic if
I'd
they
go.
did that. Yeah, but I think that the real estate's worth too much for that sort of thing.
Yeah.
They'll Trump. He knows the value of downtown real estate in Washington. I'm guessing
luxury
that
apartments
they'll
and
come
a
up with another
museum.
plan.
There we go.
That said, they did announce that the J. Edgar Hoover building will be shut down in terms of the FBI using it as their headquarters, and they're going to move the headquarters to the Ronald Reagan building. and International Trade Center, the big Reagan building where you go to get stuff done. Right now, I don't know if this is a permanent move or a temporary move, but that if it's permanent, that would be incredible, saving the taxpayers tons of money.
It's a cost-saving move.
Yeah.
First of
the
all.
announcement follows nearly 2 decades of attempts to find a needed space to meet the FBI's mission and workforce requirements. Previous efforts focused on constructing a new suburban campus, which would have cost the taxpayers billions of dollars and taken years to construct. In support of the administration's goal to optimize federal real estate portfolio, the GSA and FBI identified an existing federal property. So there you go. And it's brilliant because if you think about it, remember all of the videos of like the Small Business Administration and HUD and the Department of Education, where after COVID, so many people have been working from home in the federal government that it's just floor after floor after floor of empty space. So why in the hell would we be building a new space other than for people's egos?
Right. Again, HUD is leaving. I have seen some of the news reports on that HUD building. It is actually quite ironic that the HUD building, Housing and Urban Development, is falling apart.
Yeah, no, it's a condemned building is where HUD is working.
Yeah, it's literally dangerous to be in there. And instead of making these repairs, which would, I don't even know how many billions of dollars that would cost, they're moving to Alexandria, Virginia, into, I believe, the National Institute of Health building or National Science Foundation. Anyway, it was a science-y building. They're moving in there. But again, saving taxpayer dollars. And then, yes, there are this FBI move over to the Ronald Reagan building, there are some concerns about security, but they can build that in. That is not,
of
doesn't
course
seem to be a problem.
That's a lot cheaper and more efficient than building a whole new complex, which is what they wanted, right? And now, some red flags, it keeps the operations of the FBI management downtown D.C., a stone's throw away from politicians. There was some sort of, silver lining to the idea of moving those people outside of the Beltway, thus making them less, controlled by the politics of the day. And
I don't think that's geography. I think that is it. Honestly, I don't think. And where they moved to, Maryland? Oh yeah. Yeah, that's wholesome Midwest country there. Give me a break. So, I don't think that's really the problem. There is a cultural problem within the FBI. And, I don't think that would have been solved by moving to Maryland.
Ooh, speaking of a cultural problem in Maryland, Senator Chris Van Hollen, the man who is only known. He's only known by the American people and the people of Maryland because he flew down to El Salvador to rescue a gangman.
No, you got to say it better, Larry. He didn't go down to rescue. He went down to have cocktails with a human trafficker. And a wife beater.
And to die on the hill of due process. It was all about due process. Oh, he put out a statement about this. He said, "Let me be clear." I love it when politicians say, "Let me be clear."
Yeah, let me be clear. Mm-hmm. That means
let
serious,
me be
folks.
clear. I will oppose the use of any funds to move the FBI headquarters to a location other than the Greenbelt site, which was selected after exhaustive review because, unlike the Reagan building, it is a secure location that meets the FBI's mission requirements. I'm sorry. So the Reagan building, where, the State Department has offices in the Reagan building, I visited them before, in downtown D.C., a block and a half away from the Department of Treasury, 3 blocks away from the White House, can't be secured. So he's telling me that Greenbelt, Maryland is a more secure location than downtown Washington, D.C. on Pennsylvania Avenue. Make that make sense to me.
Can't help you there.
It doesn't make sense because this is all about a boondoggle. This is all about Chris Van Hollen using federal dollars and spending it and wasting it in his state of Maryland. Sorry, Chris, you backed the wrong horse and you're on the wrong end of this one. It's 7:43.
Wednesday on the Derek Hunter Show, the big, beautiful bill moves over to the big, ugly House of Representatives. What will happen? We'll talk about it at 3 o'clock on WMAL.
As we told you yesterday, the president, along with the Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem, traveled to Florida to get a tour of what is now being called Alligator Alcatraz. It's an island prison, detention center, let's call it, in the Everglades. Joe Biden, when he had his open border policy and allowed millions of people into this country, paid for luxury hotels in Manhattan Julie Gunlock. Not even Queens.
I know.
Manhattan. And Donald Trump, on the other hand, his Department of Homeland Security asked the state of Florida to create a center, and they did it in a week, by the way. They built this thing, and it's ready for operation. And people are going nuts because, it's a detention center. So there are, beds within fenced-off areas.
Yep.
And they're saying they're putting people in cages.
Yes, because, and honestly, it is quite the switch from the luxury hotel in Manhattan, which, by the way, I can't afford to go on a vacation. I can't afford a hotel room in Manhattan.
That's right.
But these people get these luxury accommodations. And spare me this idea that that's not happening. There are hundreds of man-on-the-street interviews with the people staying in these luxury apartments who are getting all of these things, and they're kind of shocked. They're like, wow, I'm getting food, we're fed, I get walking around money, I get a cell phone. So yeah, this is quite a change, and frankly, it's yet another one of these actions that will reduce the incentive to come into the country.
Well, that's the key, reducing it. And everyone's like, oh, why does Christine Noem do it? Why did they do this big publicity thing? It's to get the word out. It's so that everybody knows you get caught illegally in this country, you're going to end up here. 3,000 detainees this place can hold, and it's meant to be a deterrent. That's the whole point, right? Listen, you don't like the idea of people in cages, which it's not cages. You could describe any jail in America as putting people in cages. Okay, these are bunk beds, with multiple people within each quadrant. And yes, they are fenced in for security purposes. That's the whole idea of a detention center. And if you don't want to end up as a person in a cage, don't break the law and don't come here illegally. It's really that simple. Super easy compact we made in a society, in Western civilization. We have prisons. They're really bad places. You don't want to be there. And to avoid it, don't break the law. That's how we work. That's how it happens. That said, we introduced this with the Tokens singing Lions Sleep Tonight, which means this is critter news, right? So we got to focus on the alligators.
That's right.
President Trump, on his way down to Alligator Alcatraz, was specifically asked about the alligators and their role in the security measures that have been put in to ensure that there are no escapees. And President Trump offered a bit of advice to anyone who might be running away from an alligator. Listen.
I guess that's the concept. This is not a nice business. I guess that's the concept. If the snakes are fast, but alligators we're going to teach them how to run away from an alligator, okay? If they escape prison. How to run away. Don't run in a straight line. Run like this. And you know what? Your chances go up about 1%, okay?
So apparently, and by the way, kids, don't try this at home. I'm not sure necessarily that this is entirely accurate. President Trump said today, without evidence, that the most effective way to run away from an alligator is to run in a squiggly line, serpentine, if you're a fan of the old movie In-Laws. Now, we have fact-checked this with Politico and with the Washington Post, and at this time, we have to award this claim 3 Pinocchios.
The humorlessness of the mainstream media is maybe the best part of the Trump administration when they fact-check things that he's saying obviously is in jest, or that you're just not able to understand that Trump is not a Romney, a Bush. Clinton actually had his moments, but...
Julie,
yeah.
When the President of the United States uses the authority of his office to declare to the world that the safest way to run from an alligator, if being chased, is in a curved or staggered line versus a straight line.
God, I love him.
You need to take this seriously, and if he's not going to be completely accurate, people will die. In fact, the Congressional Budget Office has already determined that upwards to 35 American children, mostly of color, will die because of the president's statement yesterday.
Yes.
And I apologize that we have had to shed, but be warned, if you were being chased by an alligator,
there you go.
You're dead already, honestly. It doesn't matter how you run. Yeah, just accept it. It's what it is. It's 7:53.